Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Living It Up with Louie B. So I got a banger for you guys today. I found this Nintendo 64 controller, and as soon as I saw it, I told myself I have to have this thing. Look at it. It is a clear case Nintendo 64 controller that shows off all of its electronics. And immediately I told myself, I gotta mod this thing. Alright, I'm gonna put some lights in here so it can shine bright and glow on all these electronic internals that are in here. So I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I am a huge modder. It's something that I'm very passionate about. So please stay tuned for more projects in the future of what I will mod next. But for now, let's go ahead and check out this Nintendo 64 project, starting off with the electrical schematic. Alright, so this is the schematic that I made for the N64 controller LED mod. It's a very simple schematic. There's nothing to it really because we're using such little components and we're adding to the circuitry. We're not necessarily changing anything that's already there. So we're going to start with the power source, which is the controller port, and we'll see later on in the video it shoots out 3.3 volts. So now between the power source and the LEDs, there's going to be a switch installed. And this is very important because this will give us the control to turn the LEDs off or on whenever we feel like it. After the switch, the LEDs will get installed and they will be wired in parallel, which means that all positive contacts will touch all other positive contacts and all negative contacts will touch all other negative contacts. Then after that, ground takes over, which will complete our circuit right back to the controller port. Like I said, simple, nothing to it. And with that said, let's get back to the project. Wow, look at this blast from the past. So I found this Nintendo 64 controller at one of those retro stores that we have here locally. And when I went in there looking for a deal, in their $10.99 or below bin, I'm scrounging and looking, and I found a few things that I like, but there it was, just sitting there, literally at the bottom of the bin. And I had to take it, I had to bring it home and give it a nice place to stay. And as I'm admiring its beauty, the first thing that came to mind was, let's mod it. And you know, that's what I gotta do. In case you missed it in the title, I will be modding this controller with RGB LED lights, which are currently rated to a maximum of 3.4 volts. So first things first, let's take out the beautiful Nintendo 64 and figure out what is the voltage that is coming out of the controller ports. This is very important because we need to make sure that we're not going to overpower or underpower the RGB LED. Remember, it only has a maximum voltage of 3.4 volts. The other important thing that this test will derive for me is the polarities of the prongs. There are 3 leads in the controller port, and I honestly don't know what the polarities are. However, now making note that the right lead is negative, you can see that I am getting a maximum of 3.3 volts out of the 2 remaining positive leads. Knowing this information, I can now safely test one of the LEDs without a resistor, because the maximum voltage rating is 3.4 and the ports are only pushing out 3.3. I mean, let's be honest, aren't these LEDs gorgeous? They fluctuate through the RGB spectrum, and when they cycle through it, I like the color cyan blue the most. To cover all my bases, I will be testing this LED with a 430 ohm resistor. Once added to the circuit, this should bring the overall voltage going to LED by 1 whole volt. The multimeter confirmed this value. Now, it's not bad, it's just that I don't think it's bright enough to my taste, so we're gonna go ahead and mod it without the resistor. Now that we know and confirmed all the electrical data, we can go ahead and commence the mod, starting with the disassembly of the controller. This particular controller has about 9 screws to be taken out. And I also noticed that some of the holes are very deep, so you're going to need to use a Phillips head with a long, slim shank. But don't worry, I will not be showing all the screws being taken out. That is kind of a boring process. Instead, let's go ahead and start with fun fact number 1. Did you know that the Nintendo 64 controller featured 2 major innovations that changed the gaming industry and also created a few standards? And those are the analog stick and the trigger behind the controller known as the Z button. At the time, no one has seen a controller like this before, making it the most unique controller during its era. Now finally taken apart. Man, can we just take a minute to marvel at this wonderful piece of technology from the late 90s and early 2000s? It is such a great technological piece of our gaming history. At this point, we're going to measure the length of the wire needed for the LED bulbs. I decided to use only 5 LEDs, which means I'm going to need 5 pairs of wire, one for the negative and one for the positive. I ran out of red wire, so I decided to use blue wire for the positive and black for the negative. If you have not seen an LED bulb before, this is pretty standard for this style of LED. The legs are pretty long, with the longest leg being the positive leg. Now I'm going to cut them down because I don't need it this long, and then I'm going to solder the wires to the legs. But of course, you know I gotta hit you with that fun fact number 2. So one of the innovations that the Nintendo 64 controller is known for is having an expansion slot in the back that use small cartridges and other devices to enhance the gameplay, such as the transfer pack, memory cards, or the rumble pack, which first debuted with the release of Star Fox 64, making it the first time that players received a vibrational feedback from the game, which soon became an industry standard. As we move along to the installation process of the LEDs, I will be taping the positive wire with red tape so it does not collide with the negative to cause a short when it's being insulated with the heat shrink tube. When accessible, it's always better to use heat shrink tubing for insulation as opposed to just using electrical tape. Heat shrink tubing conforms to the object that is being heated, and it will last a long time, making it a much safer option. Second to this, it looks a lot more professional when used. This is the switch that I will be using for the process. This is a simple press switch that, when pressed, it will either allow the electricity to go through the switch or break the current altogether. This is a perfect spot for the switch, which we will be working on installing a little bit later. At this moment, we will attach the wires to the switch as well as insulate them. Yes, young lady in the back. Of course I can bless you with another fun fact. So, the introductions of the C buttons on the Nintendo 64 controller were very innovative for its times. The C buttons allowed the player to move the in-camera inside certain games like Mario 64, or act as action buttons like in Super Mario Smash Bros. However, with modern controllers today, some of the functions that the C buttons controlled are now being controlled by an analog thumbstick. With our switch fully prepped, our next step is to install 2 additional positive and negative leads to the existing circuit of this controller, further enabling extra flexibility to our mod. After applying flux to the leads on the board that are going to be altered by solder, this next extra step I like to take so that the soldering process is that much easier. What I am doing is that I am tinning the wires, giving them a little bit of solder. This will allow for a stronger solder joint to be made between the wire and the lead that is on the board. And now I have my 2 positive and negative electrical anchors on the board. It is now time to attach the switch to the positive circuit of the controller. We will be attaching the switch via solder, as well as heat shrinking the newly soldered joint. With the switch complete, we will now work on attaching the LEDs to the circuit. What I have done is that I have twisted together all the negative wires and all the positive wires of the LEDs. Then I will solder together all of the negative wires of the LED to the new negative anchor on the board. I will repeat this process with all of the positive leads of the LEDs to the new positive anchor on the board. Of course, you know, I had to heat shrink these new joints. Wait, hold on. Do you guys hear that? Yeah, what I'm listening is me telling you about this new super fun fact number 4. So the Nintendo 64 is also known for being one of the first consoles to have an impressive array of color selections for their controllers. This is very significant because at the time, most consoles released their controllers in either gray or black. Talk about an effective marketing scheme. With all of my wires fully soldered to the motherboard, it is now time to transition to attaching the Switch to the controller mold. This was an exciting part of this mod because I truly didn't know where I was going to put the Switch. I looked at various places in the controller mold, but ultimately I decided on putting it right behind the wiring harness that sticks out from the controller, which allows the wires to connect to the Nintendo 64. It is a simple modification, really. All I gotta do is drill a hole the size of the button on the Switch, and then shove the Switch inside the mold so the button will stick out through the hole. After giving it a quick test, the button fits very well inside the hole. This will ensure a snug fit. In this next step, I used a silicone adhesive in order to make the LEDs stick to the controller mold or the PCB board as seen above. I'm starting to get really excited here because we're getting to that point in the modification where we gotta start putting everything back together. So how's about we venture into fun fact number 5? Did you know that the Nintendo 64 controller could actually hurt you? I think my Mario Party players know what I'm talking about. See, there were games in Mario Party as well as other games in the Nintendo 64 repertoire that required you to rotate that joystick really fast. What we would do is that we would put our palms on that joystick and when pressure rotated very quickly. Well, doing this over time and very often caused blisters on your hands. I guess no pain, no gain. In this next step, we will be using the silicone adhesive to paste the LEDs onto the controller mold. One thing I want you to notice is the cable management of this project. When doing modifications to really anything, cable management is key to ensure the safety of the wires as well as a successful mod. In this particular project, I found it best to bundle up all the excess wiring and then placing it in a vacant spot above the Z trigger button. After pasting the LEDs to the controller mold, we are now ready to close the controller back together. This part is very important, so pay close attention that you do not crimp, damage, or cut any wires during the process. The best advice I can give you during this process is to be very patient. Now that we're finishing the project and these next steps, we will be closing the controller and screwing it back together. So how about I hit you with a couple of final fun facts. The introduction of the thumbstick was a very groundbreaking idea for its time. Nintendo introduced the joystick because it was the best way to play three-dimensional games. Thanks to its smooth and precise features, the joystick made gameplay so much more enjoyable, giving players a 360-degree control in a three-dimensional world. Also, I know you've noticed the unique design of the Nintendo 64 controller. It was designed this way because at the time, there was a transition between two-dimensional games and three-dimensional games. The fact was that the D-pad was best for 2D games and the joystick was best for 3D games. Nintendo wanted to appease to both of these cultures, which is why they added both features to the controller. So if you were going to play a two-dimensional game, you will hold the left and the right sides of the controller, but if you were going to play a three-dimensional game, you were going to hold the middle and the right side of the controller. And with that, we have successfully closed and secured our Nintendo controller. And let's take a look at this button in action. It's working very well and I couldn't be any more happier with it. And now it is time to give it a good test. With the anticipation fully killing me, I have to test out this button. Alright, that is an amazing sign. It is actuating perfectly and it is allowing the electricity to flow through on its on position. And with that, I gotta say, this was a successful mod. Look at how the LED lights glow and how they cycle through the RGB spectrum. It makes the controller look mysterious, even mystic. Guys, I gotta say, I'm honestly super happy with how this came out. The whole project from start to finish, and the fact that the LED lights turned on instantly is even that much better. And I say that because sometimes with modifications, things just happen. As you're trying to add all these different components, you might have caused an open or a short, or you have a faulty component. So the fact that it turned on first try just makes me really happy. But of course, you know, we have to test it with a game. And what better than Super Mario 64? Let's go! And with that, we gotta call that a dub. 100% this controller is working normally as it should, and not only that, it looks freaking amazing. This mod project turned out really great, and I'm really excited to add this fully modded N64 controller to my collection. Thank you so much everyone for stopping by and checking out the project. I truly really appreciate you. Mods is one of my passions, so I was very happy and excited to share this project with you. There will be more mods in the future, so if you like the content, please hit that subscribe button and that notification button so you don't miss it next time. And with that, I truly wish a happy and safe day for everyone and nothing but positivity in your future. This is Louie B, signing off.